Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sincerely Agile with Mary. This is the show where we promote the lean agile mindset, where we learn, unlearn, and relearn, and a place where we want to be awesome and wholesome together. My name is Mary Lanyon. I'm an enterprise agile coach, and as always, I am your host. Now, today we are looking at expectations versus agreement. I wonder if you have fallen victim of that, being in a situation where you were expecting so much, but you hadn't actually, gone into any kind of formal, or verbal agreement with the person in question. With me today, I have Pradeepa Narayanaswamy, a leadership and executive coach, to discuss this all important topic with me. And I am just going to invite her to the screen. Hello, Pradeepa.
Hi, Mary. So glad to be here. So grateful to be here.
I am honored to have you. I mean, you were supposed to come on the show in, was it April or February?
February. Yes,
February, but you got caught up in the Texas storm.
yes,
Now,
ma'am.
that
Yes,
that
ma'am.
wasn't very pleasant, was it?
It was actually a great experience to go through that because you live life expecting, right? Things will happen a certain way. For people who didn't realize what Mary is talking about, is Mary and I were scheduled to do this show in February. And just that weekend, we were pounded with 4 to 5 inches of snow here in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. And Texas is not prepared. Texas was not prepared for that kind of a snow, Magadan. And I personally, amongst so many other residents of Texas, lost power. And we lost power for 3.5 straight days. And me and my family, we have to actually we went to Oklahoma City for a few days and stayed there in a hotel. I have a very young son and a husband who wasn't also at the time not feeling well, so we couldn't stay here with such a cold home, and
Hmm,
not having food, not having electricity, ice cold water was just not a good combination.
not at all.
All the stores were closed. Nothing was available in anywhere.
I can imagine. And
Yeah.
talking about expectation, I mean, you just never know. We're not
You
in
never
control
know,
of
right?
these things, isn't
So,
it?
Mary, to be honest, right? Like after that, my husband and I, we actually prepared. Like, okay, things like this can happen at any point in life, right? Like any point in time. This is eye-opening for us. So, what do we need to do to prepare ourselves for the future, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of going and blaming everybody who is, responsible, but what
Mm-hmm.
we do to own this, right? Like how can we, what is the lesson that we learned? How can we be better prepared if anything like this happens, right? So
Absolutely.
so we invested in few things after that, just to get us through some emergency situations.
Absolutely. And I'm sure the city councils also had a lot of learnings to take away from that.
Absolutely. And one of the awesome things, I know a lot of people were, curious of
Hmm.
outside of Texas, were curious about, how things are in Texas. But one thing, just being here on the ground, experiencing it for the I saw so many of our friends and relatives and people, neighbors coming
Hmm.
together and helping each other out. My next door neighbor on this side, I'm just showing my hands because they live this side. My next door neighbor opened up their homes for the three of us to hang out, right? Like, because we couldn't stay here. We booked a hotel, we went to the hotel lost power. So we
Hmm.
were back home and it was dark. And our neighbor said, like, Deepa, Sai, come on over here. You can stay here for that night. They just had the gas fireplace running.
Hmm.
Um, super super grateful like that. I know many people who had whatever availability to keep
Hmm.
at least warm, right? Like, and with
Absolutely.
food, and just people were opening up their homes, and that was so beautiful to see,
I
right?
can
I'm
imagine. I
so
can
grateful to
imagine.
be part of this wonderful state.
Absolutely. Well, Pradeepa, let me introduce you properly to our audience. But before I do that, let me see who's joining us. We've got Ronke. Hello, Ronke. Ronke is joining us. We've got Mobola from Zurich, Victoria.
Hi.
Ronke saying hello from London. Michaelania is joining us. And we've got Stella da Silva. Thank you, Stella, for being here as always. Thank you so much. And we've got Malay Benjamin also calling from London. Now, let me introduce you properly to our audience. Now, Pradeepa is a leadership and executive coach whose mission is to help leaders see and bring out the better version of themselves to work and life. She is an agilist at heart and helps organizations with their transformation journey. She also maintains her private coaching practice where she coaches individuals in all aspects of life. Pradeepa is an avid voice for infertility and adoption and talks on this subject around the world. Pradeepa is a TEDx speaker and the best-selling author of Infertility Can Suck. She wrote a book, Infertility Can Suck Less, and that book is on Amazon. We'll talk very briefly about it. So, welcome to our show today. Welcome to Sincerely Agile with Mary. It's such an honor to have you here, Pradeepa. Now, you are also in the agile space.
Yes.
Tell us how did you transition to the agile space? And did you have an aha moment, right?
Yeah.
In that space?
Awesome. Yep. So I've been an agilist. Okay, let me backtrack, right? Like I started my career in 99, 2000. I joined as a software engineer, and I actually was a Java developer back then when Sun Microsystems owned it. That was a long time ago. And when I back then that was in India, I had my first job, moved here after my marriage, and I continued as a developer and web developer. And then I transitioned into testing from being in web development. And when I was there in 2006, my first exposure to Agile came in the form of a boot camp at the organization I was working. It was Wells Fargo, a division of Wells Fargo in Minneapolis at that time. And they were transitioning into Agile, and all the team members were asked to join a boot camp. Personally, personality wise, I am of the fact that I love collaborating with people. I want to have that open communication. I want to have that quick feedback loop, right? Even before I knew about the manifesto, even before I knew about the values and principles, I was acting that way. I was behaving that way. So during the boot camp, when I saw the first time the values, like my eyes, you can see me, I have bigger eyes, but my eyes grew even bigger looking at them, like, wow, somebody wrote this makes total sense for me.
Yeah.
Right? This is how work should be. Right? This is how work should be. I'm so glad somebody said this in a way that I've been trying to behave and live like that. So for me, that was my first ever exposure to agility in a very formal way, right? Like in a very formal way. And nevertheless, to say that my first ever team, where I was a tester, and we had an amazing set of people. We really rocked it. We really, it was a cross-functional team. We were sitting in a room with no windows. Actually, I still remember that it was in Minneapolis, where we did not have any light per se, but we worked so well together, right? Like we really hit it off, and it was a very successful product, such a very successful project. So I know, right, like my first experience with Agile was successful, so I know it works, right?
Right.
Being part of that, it's not like I was standing in the sideline and experiencing and observing people. I was part of the game, right? Like I was.
Absolutely. So was it the values and principles that the manifesto, was that what gave you that aha moment to say, you know what, this is it?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, absolutely. I really didn't know how to verbalize it. I just worked like that. This now, like, okay, this is now, there is a way that's being defined around this.
Yeah.
This is it for me.
Yeah.
Like I know it works, and we made it work.
Yeah. Now, today we're looking at expectations and agreement. And I know this is something you're really, really, excited about also. Give us in your words, what do we mean when we talk about expectation? What do we mean when we talk about agreement?
Yeah, I wanted to start off with expectations and then slowly we will transition into agreements. Okay, so that's a great question, Mary. Ex- so in life, right, like whether it's professionally or personally, right, if you think about, right, and maybe I'll just ask you and the audience, like whoever has joined us, this question, like, you don't have to answer that. If you feel, if you wanted to answer something like that, Mary, go for it, we can have a conversation. But think about a time in your life where you felt disappointed.
I've lost count.
Right, just one, right?
Uh-huh.
And we all have that. And like
Mhm.
you said, I felt disappointed with somebody else or with myself, right?
Yeah,
So many times,
yeah, yeah.
right? And what I did not realize, like I'm going through my own personal transformation, my personal growth journey for the last 7 years, right? I've been working with coaches, right? Like different coaches have served me. I will continue to work with coaches as long as I am coaching at some capacity, right? Like that's the commitment. But through
Yes.
this personal development work that I'm doing, you know, I was, I had these aha moments about these disappointments that I'm having, right? And when I dug deeper into understanding where are they coming from, right? Like where are they originating from? Majority of the time, it was something that I expected
Mhm.
that was not met, right? Something that I expected from somebody else that was not met per my expectation. Right? And people, yeah, a fair, so Stella says like a fair few disappointments, right? So Stella, so think about these disappointments and actually dig a little bit deeper. Like what was your part in having those disappointments, right?
Exactly.
Because for me, it was pretty revealing. Almost always, yes, absolutely, right? It was pretty revealing for me that I am the cause for my own disappointments because I was just going around and expecting different things from different people, right? And you asked for the definition, right? Expectations are one way.
Hmm.
It, it's Pradeepa expecting something from the other person, right? It can be self-imposed as well. It's Pradeepa expecting something from Pradeepa, and it's very one way. So oftentimes, first of all, right? Okay, let me ask you a different question here, Mary. Think about this, and for your audience too. Think about sometimes or a time in your life where you know that you're disappointing somebody,
Hmm.
right? You know that somebody has this expectation on you and you're quite not able to meet that. And the feeling that you have about not able to meet that, we all have that,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Right from the childhood,
Mm-hmm.
right from the childhood. As parents, right? Like I'm just using me from my childhood, right? Like my parents expected me to perform at school at a certain level, wanting me to get grades at a certain, right? That's an expectation, right? And you know, when you enter into workforce, right, your leader, your manager expects certain things from you,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you are, let me take it to personal life for a bit, right? Like if you have people at home, right, whether you're married or not, doesn't matter, right? You have expectation out of those relationships.
Yeah.
If you have children, right, you expect something out of your children, out of your child, right? So expectations are all around us. We sometimes, before this revelation for me, before this understanding for me, I walked around in this universe having all sorts of expectation,
Hmm.
right? All sorts of expectations. And what I also, realized was, if somebody, let's say, if I expected, um, let me go back to my childhood, right? Like if my parents expected me to get, let's say, 80 percentage or above,
Yeah.
right? I got it, right? Okay, I expected that. That's your responsibility. You got it. So what? If I don't get it, right? If my score goes lower, guess what happens? There is a display of disappointment.
Yeah.
And we do that all the time.
All the time. When you said we should take a moment and think of the part we have played in that disappointment, you
Yes.
know, I'm sure a lot of us have gone through that, motion or emotion, if you like. There was a point in my life where I had to really take a step back.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was a huge step back to say, hey, you're the problem here. I
Yeah.
had to come to that awakening that I was a huge problem in that disappointment.
Yeah.
I was expecting something, but hey, there was no conversation around it. There was no agreement
Yeah.
around that to
Yeah.
even say, is this person even capable of meeting those expectations? And like you said, we have this playing out a lot in our family settings. And when we talk about family settings, just like you just said, father, mother expecting A, B, C, D from their children without even having a conversation, believing we can just exact that authority as parents. I mean, there's a place for command and control, if you like. And there's
Yeah.
also a place for conversation, even with our young children, okay?
Yeah.
Uh, I'm coming from a culture that was predominantly, do as directed.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would, own up to the fact that I passed on a bit of that, or should I say, I took on a bit of that as well, because you can only give what you know, right? But with time, I started to unlearn those behaviors myself, even with my children.
Yeah.
Because you get to a point with your children where you have to start negotiating with them.
Yes.
You have to start negotiating.
Yes.
And then in relationships also, there's so much that we expect, but with no conversation, with no prior conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because nobody, right? Like if nobody likes to live up to somebody's expectation, it's so stressful because it's like you're constantly chasing the next thing. It's constantly chasing the next thing. So guess what? Expectations leads to resentment.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
makes people anxious,
Mm-hmm,
right? It's very stressful,
mm-hmm.
right? We don't realize that, right? Like when we keep expecting the person who's on the receiving end, they're going to feel all sorts of these anxiety,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
And I think we also put ourselves under pressure and we create unnecessary anxieties for ourselves,
Yeah.
assuming what the other person expects from us.
Yes,
Again,
exactly.
without having that conversation.
Exactly. It's like I said, it's a one-way street, right?
Mm.
And one of the things that I have also come to realize personally, I'll raise my hand and I'll say, I have done this many times. Uncommunicated expectations are the worst, right? You have this expectation in your mind, and you somehow magically believe the other person can read your mind. They are this mind reader, right? Like they have that is, and somehow they will be able to read the mind, somehow they will understand what the expectation is, and they will they will be able to satisfy that,
Mm.
right? And Stella says we often are the
Yeah,
problem when it comes to expectations and disappointments. Yes, my dear, absolutely.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And the thing is, I work in the corporate space as a leadership and executive coach, and I coach a lot of leaders. And I'll share an example, right?
Mm.
Without exposing anything. Once I
Mm-hmm.
was coaching an executive leader, and he took that executive position quite recently. And a lot of new members joined his team. A lot of new leaders joined his team, this person's team. And, one day during our coaching session, he was very frustrated. This person was very frustrated. And, where I was wanting to talk about something else, he was talking about, like, Pradeepa, I have these senior leaders in my team. They just don't know what it means to be a senior leader in my team. And I was curious, right? Like, as a coach, like, okay, so let's call him John, right? Like, just for the sake of conversation. Hey, John, so tell me, what do you mean? Right? Pradeepa, these are people who have been in this organization for X number of years. They should know. They should know. And I asked, like, John, have you, I know you are a new leader and they're part of your team. Have you had any conversation with them, right? As to your definition of what the senior leader in your team would be, right? And for that, Pradeepa, did you just hear me? They are in this organization for 13, 14, 15 years. They should know. I should not be telling them. There you go. Expectation.
That's right.
Right? Expectation led to disappointment. Right? So we ended up exploring the conversation around agreements, right? Because John, they cannot get into John's mind and understand what John's expectations are, right? Their manager, their previous manager and leader would have expected something else and probably have communicated. This is entirely new, right? We assume, right? Like, we make a lot of assumptions without validating them, right? A good agilist would validate their assumption, right? So as a leader, how can we validate our assumptions? Because we are just assuming that that person would know, and then we get disappointed if they didn't know about it. That is irresponsible as a leader, right? So
absolutely.
Back to that communication you're talking about, right? Like, can we have that communication?
Yeah.
Right? How can I have that communication with you so that you understand what I'm looking for, and I will allow that conversation? It's not like, again, me telling all his newer leaders this is what John expects from all of you. All right, got it? Great. It's not that. It's having that conversation. It's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
Creating those agreements, having that conversation is a two-way street.
And as you were talking, I just caught a glimpse of the next question, and we are already dancing around this. Yeah. Why might it be important to understand the distinction as well as how they work together? That is expectations and agreements.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to understand the distinction, right? Like I pointed out, expectations often is a one-way street.
Yeah.
And I've seen people telling me, I've seen leaders, or I've heard leaders telling me, Pradeepa, but I've told them my expectations. What else do you want me to do? They know. It's not like I haven't communicated. They know. Here are my 5 expectations. This is it, right? It's a one-way street. It's still, let's a parent telling child what to do.
What to do.
A husband telling wife what to do. A wife telling husband what to do. A manager telling their employee what to do.
Without having that conversation that sets us up for success.
Exactly.
To say, okay, this is my expectation of you. Am I even capable of, meeting that expectation? Do we have the right environment that sets me up for success? Yes. To actually meet that expectation? What will I need, or what needs to change?
Absolutely.
In order for me to be able to meet up to that expectation.
Exactly. We don't ask that next question, right? Here are my expectations. That's fine. But what do you need from me? Right? That's creating, that's co-creating, right? That's negotiating. You said you negotiate with your children. Absolutely, right? You should be allowing the other person, right? You should be allowing the other person to express where they are coming from, what they need to satisfy what you expect out of them,
Mm,
right? I love this word that I use quite often. It's co-authored by two people. An
mm,
agreement is co-authored. An
mm.
expectation is somebody, I author it and I give it to you. It's basically throw it over the wall,
Yeah.
right? It's throw it over the wall. You pick it, you follow
Mm,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it absolutely.
Mm.
And if you
Yeah.
have the opportunity to co-author and co-create,
Yeah.
you, as the other person, you feel you're vested in this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you feel like you are listened to.
Mm. We have a comment here from
Yeah,
Michael. It depends, though, he says. A healthy balance is okay. A parent who knows the strength of his or her children can have a reasonable expectation from them, and that is okay. I mean, it's still a one-way street. And well, I'm going to just make this quick comment here. What we're saying is you have that expectation, but how can you help that person, or how can you actually set yourselves up for success? That is the question here, right, Pradeepa? What do you
yeah,
have to say to this?
absolutely. So great question, Dr. Michael. So yes, absolutely. As a parent, you can expect your child to perform, right? The key here, it's not about not having an expectation. It's about allowing the child to understand, right? Like having that conversation, allowing the child to understand and allowing them to ask you anything that they want as a support, right?
Hmm.
To experience, right? Like to be able to go after this, right? Let's say if you are expecting your child to play piano well, just using that as an example, right? They may have some natural intuition and ability to do that, right? And this is having that conversation with your child, right, about piano playing, whether their heart is also still in there, right? And what can you as a parent do to help them get excited about this, right? Any help they need, right? So I actually read an example here from a book that I'll share here. I think that might be useful, right? So in around this topic, so a coach goes into an organization to help with coaching, right? And the boss, he was going for an executive coaching, and the boss of the organization was very disappointed because they were failing on delivering something to their customers by a certain due date, and he was very disappointed with the foreman, right? So called the foreman and asked, right? The coach was like wanting to facilitate a conversation, right? Like, okay, um, what's going on here? Like, why are you disappointed? And it said, like, our customers wanted this feature and we weren't able to deliver, and now it's getting delayed. And I expected my foreman to deliver it on time. Guess what? Now we are going to lose the preferred status, right? So very upset leader, right? And on the other hand, so when the coach talked about this difference between like expectation versus agreement and asked the leader like what kind of agreement you have with the foreman, right? And the leader was looking like as if, do you know how to dance? Did you take a ballet lesson kind of a question recently, right? Like it was looking at it like as if or something just doesn't make sense. But then the coach brought the foreman in and allowed them to have the conversation, right? Okay, so we should have delivered it by Thursday and we weren't able to. When would we be able to deliver it, right? And what can we do to deliver it by Tuesday of next week? because this conversation is happening on the Friday, the day before they were able to deliver, right? So the foreman said, I can deliver it on Tuesday, but I need extra hands, right? I need additional person to support me with this, right? And if I don't have any additional hands, I would be able to deliver it by Friday of next week, right? So the conversation, and the boss thought for a second and said, like, you know what, I would be able to give you an additional hand. Let's get it done by Tuesday. And they both shook hands, went their ways, right? So it's about that conversation, because it's about that, it's, the boss was disappointed, foreman was disappointed, because that person was going through so much of pressure. It's not like they were sitting and slacking, they were trying their best.
Yeah.
Right? But that conversation, right? Like, not everybody would be able to express or be able to raise their hand. This often happens in professional settings.
Yeah.
Right? Often happens in professional settings, and say, like, I cannot do this, boss. Right? Get me help. People often are not set up for that. So why not we ask that question? For you to be successful, what can I do? How can I help you?
Right. Absolutely. How can we set ourselves up for success? Again, it comes down to that conversation. And of course, perhaps a mindset thing, right? Also. And this is one of the, beautiful things about the agile ways of working. Like you said, your aha moment with agile was the values, the manifesto, the values and principles. Same for me. I mean, when people ask me, how long have you been in the agile space? I often say almost a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because for me, collaboration has always been key. For me, creating a space for people to grow and thrive has always been important. Emotional intelligence for me has always been important. So when I came into the agile space about 6 years ago, that was my aha moment to say, you know what, I'm already doing this. And I could also see what this could do for humanity, so to speak. I could see how agility could bring much more humane practices and ways of working into our organization, because the difficult conversations are not always easy to have. Now, you could go into an organization, they have the technology, they have the space, they have everything that they need, but the blocker is usually the mindset.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You go into organizations, they have everything, but you have a leader who is in this command and control space all the time. They don't get it that what they need to do is create a safe space for their workers. So the little things, what we really need to overcome is, they are usually quite the simple things. And that's what's so amazing about it. If we can just sit down together and have that conversation. I mean, I have often said that marriages have broken because two people refuse to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Children have run away from home because parents have refused to come to that round table and calm down their ego and have a conversation. Nations, countries have gone to war and millions of people have died. Only then do they remember there's a round table somewhere where they can have a conversation.
Yeah.
So the mindset is so key. And for me, that is the aha moment for me when I started, my agile journey, to say, these are the simple things.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are the simple things that we need to do. Just push your ego aside, show up with the right mindset and have a conversation and be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Like rightfully said, Mary, we all, right, like us as human beings, think about the evolution of human beings, right? Taking out of the pathway. If we were not being agile, right, we would not be here as humans. From caveman, cavewoman days to where we are today, we had to continuously improve, right?
Yeah.
We adjust to the situations.
Mm-hmm.
Many animals and
Yeah.
birds went extinct, but
Yeah.
humans survived, right? Cockroaches survived. I know people talk about that all the time, like that, because our ability to be agile, right? Our
Mm.
ability to adapt to
Mm-hmm.
situations, right? Our ability to continuously improve,
Yeah.
right? That made us where we are. And oftentimes, right, like when we talk about agile in organizations, we
Yeah.
forget that our basic nature is being agile, right? For example, right, like, if we, before pandemic, if any of
Mm-hmm.
you were used to driving to work, I drove. Uh, let's say if your usual path to going to work, if that road is blocked, you're not going to stop there and wonder what's going to happen. You're going to figure out what are the other road you wanted to take, and
Yeah.
you get to your meetings and you get to your office on time, right? Or whatever, right? You don't feel frozen.
Mm.
we
Mm.
we have that natural ability, but when it comes to somehow inside organization settings, we forget that,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes we talk about all these different frameworks and methods: Scrum, Kanban, Safe, you name it, right? Like ABC, XYZ, everything, right? People often think that just following that is going to get me. No, it's about having that continuous improvement mindset.
Yeah. And the interactions,
And that,
individuals and interactions.
absolutely. And having that continuous improvement mindset, it includes how can I open up? How can I ask for help, right? Like, how can I clear my expectations and create agreements?
Yeah.
How do I provide a safe space for people, right,
Mm.
to thrive? How do I provide an environment where I'm providing all the necessary things for people to thrive and bring the best out, right?
Yeah.
It's about that continuous improvement mindset,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, people think that like, oh, I'm agile because I'm doing Scrum. No,
No, no, not at all. Not at
not.
all. Not at all. And somehow I think you've also touched on that. What are the consequences of a lack of understanding of how these two words are to be used from a personal and professional standpoint? And I think we've sort of touched on that. But I would like you to emphasize more
Yeah.
on how can we leverage expectation and agreement in our personal lives, and then we'll come to our professional lives.
Yeah, absolutely. How can we leverage? I would slightly tweak this question to answer:
Mm-hmm.
how can we leverage agreements in our personal lives?
Okay.
Because what I'm promoting, what I'm sharing here is expectations leads to disappointment no matter what. No matter how clearly you define it, no matter how clearly you talk about it, right? People just don't like to live up to other people's expectations. That's it. So instead, if a relationship matters to you, this doesn't mean, Pradeepa is not telling that you have to go create agreements with everybody in the world. No, that's not it, right? Is a relationship matter to you, right? If the answer is yes, then think about, are there any disappointments in this relationship from either one of us? And if the answer is yes, then is there time, is this an opportunity to create and have that conversation, to co-create that agreement?
But how do you get to that point, though? Because perhaps one of the reasons this disappointment keeps coming up is because maybe people don't know how to initiate
Yeah.
that conversation. So,
ab-
how do we? Because I mean, that is the first step. How can I get this person's attention? How can
absolutely.
I initiate this conversation for us to really, have that agreement
Yeah.
and manage expectations?
Yeah, so you're talking about personal life, so let's talk about this, right? Like, I'm just using me as an example here,
Mm,
right? Like, let's say I have, between me and my husband, maybe let's say I have an expectation that was not met, so I'm quite disappointed in that, right? So that's just an example here. And if I'm in the heat of the moment, right, like, if I'm disappointed at my husband, maybe some of my feelings are like, I'm angry, right, like I'm frustrated, right? Maybe I'm resentful of this, right? Whatever that is, that's not a good time to have that it's not, right? Find a time to cool off, right? Find a time to cool off. and then, have a conversation. I'll give you a real example that just happened yesterday. This is between me and my son. He's 8 years old. So my son Karthik, he goes to summer camps, right? So I drop him in the morning and pick him up in the evening. And his summer camp, the latest you can pick him up is at 5:45 local time central, right? And I pick him up or my husband picks him up, depends upon our evening schedule, right? So one thing that I've noticed recently with Karthik was on Friday, I went and picked him up at 4:30 because my work was done. And, I thought, okay, it's Friday. So let me bring him and we can hang out. Brought him in and, he buckled up in the back seat and he immediately, I saw his face was quite upset and he started crying, right? And I was so like, what happened, Karthik? Like, why are you crying? And his was like, Ma, why did you pick me up early? Why did you pick me up early? I couldn't finish this game. Right? And I actually, to be honest, I started getting a little upset. Right? Because for me, I expected him to be all cheerful when I picked him up early. And here he was crying as if I did something so bad. It was like a big cry, like a really big cry, right? And of course, I ended up taking him to ice cream. That's a different story, right? But I thought about that, right? Like I got upset, right? I noticed that for myself, and then I realized, like, why am I getting upset on this, right? Because I had this inbuilt expectation. We both had expectations, right? Karthik expected me to pick as late as possible, right? And I had the expectation that, like, when I picked him up, he's going to come like all running around and happy to go home, right? Neither got satisfied. And we both were unhappy in our own terms, right? And yesterday, morning, Saturday morning, this happened on Friday. So yesterday, Saturday morning, I wanted to have a conversation with him. And I was listening, to something, and Karthik somehow say, like, for some reason he said, like, Amma, I create agreements with him quite frequently on other things, right? He said, like, Amma, we should probably create agreements as to, when you will pick me up.
Okay.
And you should pick me up only at 5:45, right? And there my ego creeped up for a bit. And I said, like, you know what, Karthik? I'll pick up when I want to pick up. Power play, right? Like, Mom, I'm
power play.
right? Like, you are 8-year-old. I did that. My ego creeped up there, right? And then I was upset about that, right? Like, you know what? I'll pick you up. If you're not going to abide by that, I'm going to stop you to sending to the summer program. Like, look at me, power playing more.
Power play,
Right?
definitely.
Fear-based, right? Then, I had the opportunity to go shower because it was in the morning. Karthik was upset. I was upset. I was taking a shower and I kind of cooled off a little bit. And I reflected on this conversation. Man, I'm doing a very poor job here. It's all expectations creeping up. How can I turn this around and turn it into an agreement? Right? Came back and dressed up, pulled Karthik in, and we had this conversation. Karthik, right? What can we agree upon with regards to our pickup time, right? In my mind, Karthik also has 2 evening classes after he comes home, and I want him to be, rested and fed before he go for his evening classes, right? And I said that, like, those days, I'm going to pick you up around like 4:30. Are you okay with that? And he said, yeah. And I gave him the reason. Here is why, right? Because you have classes at 7:00 on both these days. And I don't want you to feel very tired because I want you to come home, rest for a bit, eat dinner, and then you can go for your classes. Are you okay with that? Yes, he said. On the other days, between me and Dad, right, we will try our best to pick you up as late as possible, right? I'm not 5:45 every day, but I will pick whenever I'm picking up, and I will let Appa know as well. Like, we'll pick you up as late as possible on those days. It also, how we work, right? Like our calendars and our meetings. We will make adjustments and we will try our best, right? If for some reason, if we have to pick you up early, we will let you know. And can we agree that we're not going to be upset? Right? And he said, like, he thought for a second and he said, yes, I'm okay with that. There you go.
And that was all you needed to sit down, manage the expectations. Because like you said at the beginning, he can't read your mind and neither can you read his mind, right? So we really need to sit down and have this conversation. Now, that was a very good personal example. Now, let's move to a professional setting. How can we leverage expectation and agreement in our professional lives? This is also very, very important. Yeah. And I like the fact that you talked about the power play.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Agreements, to me, it's personally, ever since I knew about this, I created agreements with everybody that I work with that are critical for my relationship. I created agreements with my boss, right? I create agreement with my clients. For my coaching clients, I spend almost close to an hour extensively creating agreements, right? I create agreements with my team members, right? And to me, it's really important because this is a professional relationship. It's important for me. It's important for me to understand how we are going to be in this relationship with each other. Another thing, ice cream was the answer. Yes, sir. It made all of us happy that day, by the way. For sure. Agreements. Another thing that I wanted to point out is agreements are not like, it's set in stone, right? Oftentimes you create an agreement and it doesn't. I'll give you a professional example one. It doesn't work like how you created it. Then what? How do you go about it, right? So, I'll talk about a coaching client, right? So we did not have an explicit agreement, right? Like, this was early in my professional coaching days. We were scheduled to talk in the evening, right? And I was waiting on the call and the person never called. I waited for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. They never called. And I quickly texted them, hey, Angela, where are you? Right? And the response came back after like 5 minutes. Oh my God, Pradeepa, are we supposed to talk today? I'm so sorry, I forgot. I'm in the mall with my husband shopping. Right? So for me, I could have gotten upset with Angela, but guess what? I did not. It was an opportunity for me to like, okay, I will own this. I did not set an agreement here. Yeah. This is an opportunity to co-create something with Angela here, right? Yeah. And then I added, okay, when we have a coaching conversation, right? The agreement was about be on time. Absolutely be on time. And unless it's like some really dire emergency, right? We all have in our lives, right? If you miss the session, you lost it. Right? Yeah. I'm not going to redo that for you. And we will communicate each other of any last minute urgent cancellations as soon as possible. Let's create that as an agreement. Are we okay with that? So it was an opportunity for me to create something like that to Angela, right? And I used that with some other client, right? Like, call him Tom. Tom was in Miami, right? He was a real estate agent. And one day Tom was running late. So he called me and I heard some like really buzzing sound on the back. And I said, like, Tom, are you okay? I'm hearing some really background noise. He called me on time for sure. But then I said, like, Pradeepa, let's keep talking. I'm driving as fast as possible. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Let's do this. And I said, like, whoa, I'm not going to coach you while you are driving. I want you to be
Exactly.
focused, right? Like, I want you to be in a space where you and I are connected. Now I have an opportunity to co-create something else with Tom, being on time and being at a place where you're not in motion, you're not driving, you're not doing
Yeah.
something like that.
It was an opportunity for you to say, you know what, in our working agreement, safety comes first.
Exactly, exactly. Plus, I want Tom to be present, right? If you're driving, where are you going to be focusing, right? And I don't want him to, of course, get in accident or anything like that, because
Mm-hmm.
coaching, we talk about so many deeper things. And Tom at the time was going through a bad breakup and relationship problems, right? So many of our sessions were very, very deep, right? And I want Tom, I cared about Tom's safety too. Plus, I cared about the presence, right?
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that this is important for you? So
Mm.
by the way, I create, whenever I join any organization,
Yeah.
right? As a coach, whomever I'm reporting to, I create agreements with them explicitly, things that matter to me. And I have the conversation with them, how they see it, what
Mm-hmm.
they want.
Mm.
And guess what? It allows me to understand about the other person, and for them about me,
Yeah.
what's important for both of us, right? And it's not set in stone. We will
No, it's not.
we will add to it.
Mm.
And one of the things that often gets asked is, Pradeepa, I created, let's say Tom, right? Created this agreement with Tom, and Tom keeps breaking that agreement, right? By still driving and trying to take the coaching call,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I had one when I did this session for a different group. The question came around like, Pradeepa, what if somebody, I created this agreement, they agreed to this, but they are not keeping up,
Keep into it.
keeping up the agreements. What do I do? I'm getting mad at them for not keeping up the agreements. How much I can talk about that? Guess what? Actually, this is a beautiful opportunity, right? Instead of feeling resentful, instead of getting anger,
Mm-hmm.
it's an opportunity to not, it's not to go and blame that problem. If, let's say, you and I have the agreement and you're not keeping up you're part of the agreement, it's not like, Mary, you know you're not keeping it up, like,
Mm.
what's wrong with you,
Mm.
right? You agreed to that, what's wrong with you? It's not that, but rather it's an opportunity to look at the agreement itself,
Mm.
look at the agreement and ask ourselves, like, for some reason this agreement is not working out.
Why?
Why? And let's revisit that,
Mm.
because I want to make that work, because I care about you, Mary. I care about this relationship, Mary.
That's right.
And I want an agreement in place so that we both, right, like, we both have that professional relationship.
Mm-hmm. And we can set ourselves up for success.
Exactly. It's
I
an
want to ask our audience this question, Pradeepa. Please share with us, if you don't mind, if you're happy to. Have you fallen in the trap of expectation without agreement? Have you fallen in the trap of expectation without agreement? I mean, I know certainly I have.
Yeah,
I have in my personal life, I have done in my business life, and I tell you, I learned the hard way.
absolutely, all the time, right?
I learned the hard way, and it really made me to self-reflect, to say, hey, you're expecting stuff, you're almost somewhat imposing without realizing it.
Yeah,
And I'm going to push us a little bit to the emotional space here. Now, when we talk about, relationships, be it marriage, be it father, parent and child, we care so much that we feel we have the right to
yes,
expect.
yes,
Okay,
yes,
because we care so much, we love them, we care about them, we want the best for them,
yes,
and because of that, we can set these high standards. We can expend ourselves even to try and get this expectation to happen.
yeah,
But there's that one thing that isn't happening, and it is that conversation.
absolutely.
So, be it in marriage, be it in your business, be it with your children, we really have to downplay that power. I was really happy
Yes.
when you brought up that power play. Yes, we are the parent, but we really need to get to that point where we are having a conversation, we are negotiating so that we can set our children up for success as opposed to imposing. I mean, coming from a place like Nigeria, growing up, some parents wanted you to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer.
Yeah.
Yet they weren't the one that was going to go study this stuff. It was you that was going to study it. Never caring whether you liked sciences or the arts or whether you wanted to be a musician or whatever else. It was imposed on you. And
Yes.
you would hear some people say, you know what, I read medicine because my parents wanted me to be a doctor. I
Yeah.
did engineering because my parents wanted me to be an engineer and stuff like that. But I think things are changing slowly now. People
Yes.
are becoming more exposed, if you like.
Yes.
Social media and the internet is educating the world, and we're getting into that space now where we're thinking differently, and we're beginning to give children the space to really grow into their own, as it were. We're slowly coming to the hour, Pradeepa.
Yeah.
If you were to summarize this conversation to our audience today, what's your takeaway for them in
Yeah.
terms of expectation and agreement in our personal lives and in our professional lives or business lives?
Absolutely. Yeah. So whenever you feel disappointed, an opportunity to relook at what are
Mm,
all the expectations that you have. Either
mm,
it's imposed on you or either you have imposed it on other people. It doesn't matter. It works both ways, right? So it's an opportunity to relook at that.
yeah,
And it also, expectations are, like I said, one-way street,
yeah.
right? It's imposed upon the other people. It leads to resentment, it leads to anxiety, and it's very, very stressful, right? And
Mm,
also expectations are very reactive in nature, right? And it's fear based, right? Like the example that I gave with me and my son, right?
yeah,
Like if you're crying, then I'm going to stop you from summer school, right? Fear based, because I was doing that power play there. There was an
yeah,
ego, right? Like there was definitely that ego.
yeah.
And guess what? It's very cowardly, right? Because I'm using my power to impose something on somebody without allowing the other person to come with their voice. I'm
Mm,
not allowing that, right? So it's very, very cowardly in nature. On
mm,
the other hand, agreements are beautiful. Agreements are co-authored, right? Agreements are creative. It's recreated. You have the opportunity to create it and to recreate it, to
mm,
negotiate, right?
mm,
Allowing both parties to
mm.
have that conversation, right?
Yeah,
It can be with more people too, right? Like we talk about team agreements, but here, just to simplify it, allow the other person to have a voice and
yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Allow the other person to have a voice, and let's just, move away from this power play.
Yes,
Let's
ma'am.
do away with our ego because, like you said, we're creating anxiety and fear in the other person.
Yes.
Probably, if we're the one with the power, here,
Yep.
we're definitely creating an anxiety in the other person. So we're slowly coming to the hour. Pradeepa, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for finally, coming on the show. Thank you for investing your time with us here today. We have learned a lot. I tell you, a lot of us have fallen victim of this, and most of the time, we are the one to blame.
Yeah.
We are the one to blame because we're having all these expectations without, any agreement or conversation in place. So thank you very much for enlightening us on Sincerely Agile with Mary, and we hope to have you another time. Pradeepa, thank you so much, and I hope we will see you some other time, right?
Absolutely, my dear. Thank you so much, Mary. Super grateful to be here. I truly enjoyed our conversation.
Same here. Thank you so much, and we'll see you some other time. And to our audience, thank you for always showing up. Thank you for always investing your time in the show. And for next Sunday, we have something special coming your way. Now, next Sunday, we're going to have a special edition called The Elephant in the Room. I'm going to have Stella da Silva on the show. I'm going to have Veronica Owosu, and I'm going to have Omozua Isirame. And we're going to be talking about fear, the elephant in the room. And I'm just going to show you the And I will see you next Sunday. Bye bye. I can't wait to stay. Bye bye.